we've had, or I've had a number of interesting conversations through the week, and I won't name names, and if you want to self-identify as we go into comments, that's fine. But there was enough consistency in some of the questions and comments that I thought it was worth talking about. And the questions and comments, and I hope Chalet joins us. By the way, Galen's out of town, Philip is camping, Chalet is cooking, but hoping to join us. She had to delay her cooking in the commercial kitchen because of the heat and no air conditioning there. Mark Riggs spent too much time in the sun yesterday and is recovering, or in the heat yesterday and is recovering. So just so you know where some of the other people are. But some of the questions were around, and I guess the reason it's important to me to address this is they're very personal questions to me too, because I've definitely been in this space and experienced this space a lot. The questions are, let's see, I've got this friend that is in a situation and it feels like I should be speaking out. It feels like I should be saving them, but they don't want to listen. And how do I do that? And if I don't do that, aren't I breaking the first vow? Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Like, how do I fulfill that vow? By being silent? Or there are people in my life that just can't hear it, or they don't understand where I'm at, and what do I do? Do I walk away? Do I try to bring them in? Do I jettison those people? How do I deal with this? And then you know, on another front, it's like when I'm away from the Sangha, where's the Sangha? You know, and how do I keep my practice going when I'm traveling or away? And so all of these have similar qualities, and I wanted to address those because part of them are about how do we communicate who we are and what we're doing. How do we share this practice in a way that is meaningful to others and meaningful to us? How do we fulfill these vows without walking up and down Bridgeport Drive and knocking on the door and going, hey, I'm your new neighbor and I'm a Zen teacher and you should really get involved in this practice because it'll, you know, save your soul or whatever, you know, and have the door slammed in your face, most likely. How do we do this? So I wanted to turn to case 23 of the Blue Cliff Record, and there's a number of different translations here. But I think it's interesting that if you go way back in time, the same problem has been faced. It's like, how do we do this? What is the effective fulfillment of the vows? I've got a taste of something. Am I supposed to go and shout it to the heavens? What is my role? And so this case involves two practitioners, Hofuku and Chokai. And they're going on a picnic. And the name of the case is actually Fuku and Kei go on a picnic. Kai go on a picnic. Kei go on a picnic. I'm going to read from Maizumi Roshi's translations and then shift over to some commentary. When Hofuku and Chokai went on a picnic in the hills, Hofuku lifted his hand and pointed to the top of a hill, saying, "Just this is the top of Mysterious Peak." "That's true, you are right," said Kei, "but a pity," he added. Now, Seicho, who's collecting these cases, puts in a commentary here. So it's a parenthetical. Going on a picnic like that, what are you doing? I don't say there will be no one like these two fellows 100 years from now, but they will be very few. Later, Hofuku told Kiyose about this. Kiyose said, if it were not for Shoke, skulls would appear in every field. So you may be asking, what the heck does that have to do with what Dan was just talking about? And how do we translate that to the modern world? Well, listen to the preface. This is out of the Two Zen Classics book. The preface, jade is tested by fire, gold by a stone, a sword by a hair, water by a staff. In Zen training, the degree of one's attainment and one's progress is known by one's words and phrases, one's attitudes and actions, one's coming and going, one's asking and responding. Tell me, how will it be done? And then in the appreciatory verse which follows the koan, this is Mio Hocho. Now weeds go rampant. You see it clearly, but to whom could you impart it? If you, Ochoke, didn't discriminate, many would never know and their skulls would litter the field. So what is all this stuff about skulls littering the field? You know, in this, in the verse, skulls would litter the field if Shoke hadn't spoken up. In the case itself, if it were not for Shoke, skulls would appear in every field. So this is really addressing the, you know, we've called it Zen sickness sometimes, but it's like, you know, you've achieved enlightenment. And if you stay in that enlightened space and never come down off of mysterious peak, in a way, like, you know, that's enlightenment, it's nirvana, but in a way you are dead to the world, because what can you do? You're in the state of absolute samadhi and there's no sound, color, taste, touch phenomenon, right? It's perfect absolute samadhi. And if we all stayed in that state, we'd be like skulls littering the field, right? We've all attained mysterious peak and there we stayed for all eternity. So then how do you come off the peak and back to the relative world, back to what's called positive samadhi? How do you impart the wonders of this practice once you've experienced them? How do you impart that to the rest of the world? How do you be that? There's a thing in the commentary here, you know, Hofuku pointing with his finger said, this is Myohocho. Myohocho is the name for mysterious peak. Like I said, a couple of translations. Myohocho is a mythological sacred mountain mentioned in the Avatamsaka Sutras, which symbolizes ultimate reality. In these sutras, it is related that an earnest seeker after the truth named Zenzai, following Manjushri's instructions, ascended this very mountain to see and study with a certain famous monk. He searched for 7 days and failed to find Tokun, who was well known never to descend the mountain. But Tokun met Zenzai on another peak. Okay, so here's a seeker of the truth, goes up this mysterious mountain and spends 7 days looking for this teacher who's known to never leave the mountain but can't find him. And then on the 7th day, they meet on another peak. This is feeling a little bit like the Bible at this point. But so the peak of Myohocho, or mysterious peak, represents absolute samadhi, in which no thought stirs and there is neither seeing nor hearing. So that's that state of, right, everything drops away, everything falls away, complete emptiness, there's nothing there. When coming from absolute samadhi into positive samadhi, one can for the first time truly meet others. So positive samadhi is that state of enlightenment, of realization in the phenomenal world, in the world we live in. In the preface, it talks about one's attitudes and actions, one's coming and going. The coming and going is our ordinary life, our attitudes and actions, our comings and goings in our ordinary life. So, one coming from absolute samadhi off the peak into our ordinary life of positive samadhi, one can for the first time truly meet others. The 7 days during which Zenzai searched for Tokun denote the 7 senses of consciousness: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, knowing, and reflecting. When all these are transcended, absolute samadhi appears and we're up on the peak. When one returns to those 7 senses, we're now hearing and smelling and touching and tasting and perceiving again. That's our positive samadhi, which constitutes another peak. And that's the peak where he met this master. Okay, so interesting little backstory. Now, when we realize ourselves and find our true nature, right, we're on that first peak. And if we stay there, of what use are we? So we come down and find that other peak of existing in our ordinary lives, having attained some sliver of enlightenment and realization. And then we can be truly useful. We can be truly useful. But then it takes us to the question that somebody asked me this week. Well, if I don't speak up right now, if I don't tell my friend, this is wrong, this is doing you harm, then aren't I violating that vow? Sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them. And that takes us back to this quality that we've talked a lot about of where do you start? That other koan, right? Have you eaten your rice gruel yet? Have you attained any state of realization? Yes, I have. Then wash your bowl. Right here. Right here. Because very often the frustration we're feeling about, I can't get through to this person. They will not listen to me. They are in pain. I am not fulfilling the first vow by reaching them, comes from a place of our own experience of that situation, our own pain in that situation, our own story around that. And we can at least start by cleaning that up so that when this friend is reachable or asks for help, we're there with that empty bowl, that empty inso, that state of positive samadhi so that we can respond appropriately. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them is an impossible task if you're looking at it from a linear engineering relative world point of view, because they're numberless. How can you, in your life, in your part of Los Angeles that you live in or Northern California, how can you save everyone? In a relative sense, you can't. But if you start here and realize yourself, as Melissa was saying a week or so ago, I think in the talk with tension, where do I begin and where do I end? The sense that I can't save everyone comes from a delusion that everyone is not me. From that sense that I stop here at the skin somehow, right? Like this skin is the boundary of me. And if the skin is the boundary of me, and then I'm like, so I can only save what I touch, yeah, that's a problem. But isn't the point of the practice to break through that, to ask that question? Philip talked about this in book club. Maybe this was in book club too that we talked about it. Like, where do I begin and end? And all of a sudden I can see that I am infinite. And if you are infinite, then the act of saving others is right here, to continue this work, to sit zazen. Sometimes I think Zen practice and this seeing the sliver of light is like trying to stop drinking, and those, some of us have different levels of experience with this, with 12-step programs, whatever. And at first it feels necessary, and I think this is well documented, and sometimes it's an important part of getting there to not go into situations where there's drinking or drugs, right? Just make sure that you have created your environment so you're not going into that situation. And it might even involve staying away from some people or friends that are going to be part of that culture, so that we can reset, and find a place for ourselves that does not include those behaviors. But then eventually, I don't know how you go through modern life. There are liquor stores on every corner. Every time you go out to eat, it's like, would you like something to drink? Here's the beer and wine menu. Eventually, unless you're in full quarantine lockdown, you want to be able to walk through situations freely. You want to be able to go to a party and just have your center, and you're either drinking or not drinking, whichever place you're in on that as a human. Well, the practice is a little bit like that too. We can stay in this bubble right here, 26 people last Sunday, 12 or 13, depending on how you count this Sunday. We can stay right here. And the Sangha is so safe and so comfortable and so wonderful to be in, right? And so we can, in this bubble, we can talk about emptiness. Form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness exactly form. No old age and death. No end to old age and death. Okay, we learn the language. We know we can talk it to each other. But that sounds like absolute gibberish anywhere else, right? Just go out in the street and start yelling, "No old age and death, and no end to old age and death." It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And this happens with our friends. Lori and I have friends that couldn't care less about Zen. It could not care less. And at the same time, they'll say, like, "Gosh, you guys are so like calm." Now that to us feels like a joke. If you know what goes on over here in our heads, in our house, in our marriage, right? It's like, wow, you guys have such a perfect relationship. You must never fight. But it does have an effect. Andrea, do you mind? Can you speak? Andrea, are you there?
No, I can't speak. I'm driving.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm working. I'm going to work.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share a little bit of your Big Sur experience?
Yeah. I don't remember what part. Yeah. Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So Andrea was not with us last week, as some of you may remember. She took a break and went up to Big Sur. But like as a, like, I mean, a perfect Zen student, she took her Zafu and Zabuton with her to Big Sur. And so she could do Zazen. And she was with a friend who's part of the shamanic community that Lori is part of as well. And it turns out that this gentleman had practiced, I wasn't going to name, had practiced Zen in the past. And he said, and he practiced it for years, if I'm getting this right, but found that it really wasn't his path. And he ended up studying shamanism, and that is his practice. And Andrea and Rob sat together zazen while she was visiting in Big Sur. So that he's got all the gear left over, and so they sat. And if I'm getting this right, Andrea, what Rob said is, "Wow, you are really different. Like there's a really different quality to Andrea." Is that right, Andrea?
Yeah, he and his wife actually, we call it an IU. I met a few of my friends, my shamanic sisters and brothers up there, and they all were like, there's something different about you. You're really grounded. You're not up in the air. You're not in your head. You're present. And especially Rob. Rob and I are super close, and we had long discussions about Zazen and Zen practice and our shamanic practice, and he just was so impressed at how grounded and present I am. It was really, really nice.
Yeah. Did you go up there trying to sell Zen?
No. I just since moving back, I haven't seen those people, and I was just so excited to just reunite with them. I had no agenda whatsoever. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and so folks, that's one of the ways it's done, is you just go visit your friends in Big Sur. I mean, now Andrea took her cushions, but I suspect she could have gone cushionless and still had that same effect. So much of this is just who you are being. Who you are being. Now there are cases, and I don't want to play this down. There are cases in our lives where there are people that are negative influences in our lives, and to take care of ourselves, we need to just, cut it off. I think all of us have had that in a relationship at some point in time. I mean, it's hard to go through life without that. There are points in your life where you need to make a choice to excise somebody, at least for the time being, from your life. And so I do not want to suggest that that's not the case, or that you should go into such an all compassionate, loving state that you don't take care of yourself, because the practice also is a little bit like the instructions of the oxygen masks. Put your own mask on first before attending to someone else. We have to make sure that, we and you are taken care of. And part of this is sometimes it's appropriate to share. Sometimes people ask, what is going on with you? Something's different. This is like, you seem really happy. You seem really grounded. Then the question is, how do you talk about it? Melissa, how do you talk about
it? Gosh, I mean, if people say I'm grounded, what do I say? How do I talk about Zen in general?
Yeah, if it's appropriate to talk about Zen, what do you say?
It's funny. It is kind of hard for people and a lot of people don't really know what it is exactly. And so a lot of people are really curious, because I'll always say, well, I have Zen, I have Zen, I have Zen. And they're like, what is this Zen? What is it that you do? And so a lot of times I just explain like what we do. I'm like, well, we sit, we study koans, we move around the Zendo a certain way. And it's a practice of knowing ourselves and the universe. That's what I say.
So let's do a little work with that. That's great. That's a description. So
Yeah.
so Melissa, why? Why do you do this Zen thing?
Why do I do it? I mean, for me, it is a solid foundation from which to live. For me, it feels like a North Star. I've chosen it as like my guide in life. It's the best way I can describe it.
Okay, and so if you were doing the introduction to, it's okay if we do this work, right?
Oh yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah. If you were doing the introduction to Zen on a Sunday morning, how has Zen benefited you?
How has Zen benefited me? I feel like it has, the way in which it benefits me the most is it keeps me always looking kind of from above at how I'm operating. It's like it's created just a sense of awareness in life around everything that I do that to me feels like it makes me happier, more connected, more grounded, more grateful.
There we go. There we go. Okay. See, so now we're starting to get to it, right? And everything else is good. But you've heard me tell stories, right? I'm at the dinner table one night in New York, and I'm at one of the peaks of my advertising career, and I turn to Lori and Nick and say, "Have I become mean?" And they both simultaneously say, "Yes." Do you know what it's like to have your wife and 9-year-old son say you are mean? I decided that I had to do something about that. And I discovered this thing called Zen that allowed me to see who I was really being and where I was being mean and how I could be kinder. So there's like, but when you say I feel happier, more grounded, more connected, right? See, now we're getting to stuff that was like, I used to just like, I felt like I was flailing all over the place. This is a practice of grounding me in a way that I can be happier and less flailing. Yeah. Tennessee, can I call on you?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, and I want to go to you because we've already heard from Andrea and her experience of Big Sur, and I know that this practice in the Sangha, you've expressed how meaningful it is to you. So if somebody asks you, why are you doing this thing, like, what do you say?
Sanity. I mean, I would have to say it varies in every case, just depending on who I'm talking to and kind of where I'm at. But
Perfect.
Generally, being grounded and being sane, and also having a place. I mean, I just connect. I align so much with the values here, and I had come to so many of these conclusions that I learned about in more detail on my own. But I had less of a map before. So I don't know that I would tell somebody random that I met what I just said, but that is why I do it. It's because it's like now I have more of a structured map of like the things that I already had kind of intuitively felt in my own other meditation practices. I don't know the answer we were. going.
Yeah. Well, Tennessee's hit on something really important, often expressed. Gosh, I think even Plato said this, right person, place, time, and amount. So the answer can vary depending on who you're talking to, what they're asking, what their situation is. Because fulfilling these vows, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them, is simply a matter of sharing. It's another precept. I vow not to be stingy, especially with the Dharma. If the question is asked, answer. But how do you answer? And Tennessee, that's great that you said it varies. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation. That's perfect. And you had a couple of touchstones in there. It's like, just answered a lot of questions I had in all of my studies. It's given me, a context, a platform for understanding this journey I'm on. I've got a community that I can trust while I explore some of these things, and it makes me saner. This is a crazy world we live in. All of these tools, just learning, and this is something we need to practice and practice and practice. And I really mean it, not just because I want you to be out there being missionaries, but because you all are transformed in some way by this practice, and other people are going to notice, and they're going to ask you. And the more comfortable you are with answering the question, the easier it is for you, and the more powerful it is for them. Art, we don't get to hear from you a lot. You've been doing this as many years as I have. Marsh, can you unmute him? Oh, he looks like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, why do you do this?
Zen has changed my life quite a bit. I was always someone who looked out for me. I was always someone who had to deal with life on my own as I grew up by myself, essentially. You know the story. I've told it at the Zen Center. When I was 3, my father tried to throw me out of a 5th-story window, and he was stopped by the police. And I grew up without a father. My mother wasn't around because she was always working. I was like your typical New York kid who'd get in trouble every way he can. I'm fortunate that I don't have a record, and that's just luck because I really deserve one because of things that I've done. But sports got me out of all that. I became California and Pacific Coast champion in weightlifting for many years. I was in the Olympic finals before to make the Olympic team in weightlifting. But that didn't affect me nearly as much as Zen did. Because of Zen, I run 2 grief groups for Kaiser, and I enjoy that tremendously. I get as much out of it as the people do. And I also run programs at the VA. I visit with hospice patients. I'm on Kaiser's bioethics committee. So I'm involved in a lot, and I enjoy it, and I get a lot out of it, and I feel I'm contributing.
And when you say because of Zen,
it's definitely because of Zen.
But how? Like, why did?
I wouldn't have done this without Zen. I wouldn't even have considered it without Zen. For instance, at the Zen Center, we watched a film, Sitting with Shane. It was a film made by Varda, who was a filmmaker at the Santa Monica Zen Center. And because of that film, I said, okay, I'll try that. And that required sitting with people who are sick or dying at the VA. And I've been doing that for 17 years now.
Yeah.
And I've been leading grief groups for about the same time. How did I start with the grief groups? Marcia and I happened to be walking through Kaiser, and I saw a sign that said, we need people to do this work with people in bereavement. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And it's the best thing in my life, except for Marcia, of course.
Thank you, Art.
Okay, thank you.
Art touched on a number of things there. There's the power of community and just the inspiration and motivation we can get from it. Last week I talked about the wonderful quality of Zen. At least something I love about it is when you train more and more, that ability to go yes or no, to have clarity and take action or not as appropriate in a given situation. So what Art just talked about there was, I just said yes. I just went and did it. And the other thing that I think is beautiful in what you said, Art, is sentient beings are numberless. How, I vow to save them. How do I do that? Do I go try to convert everybody to Zen and get them in the Zendo? Or do I run 2 grief groups? And as an ex-weightlifter, end up on the bioethics committee of Kaiser. That's a pretty direct extension of the practice. Just going into action. Taking all those words and all of this fancy language we have and just acting. This is what I'm going to do with it. This is what I'm going to do with it. Hey, Melanie, it's maybe not fair, but it seems appropriate. Like, why come back? Why dial in?
Because I need to be of service. I've had this wonderful wild ride in the theater up here in the Bay Area. I've had quite a bit of success acting, and it's been my Sangha, the theater community up here. And with COVID, I don't know when I will ever be on stage again. And I'm sitting here without community, without a powerful outlet to put all my joy and energy in performing and bringing ideas and humanity to people on stage. So I'm dying here, basically. I feel like I'm withering on the vine, and as luck would have it, I've stumbled back into you guys. So in listening to this conversation, I gotta up my game.
And Zen in particular, you were exposed to it a number of years ago. I don't know how solid how consistent your practice has been, but why is Zen? You could form an online theater group for kids, and maybe you will, but it's like, what is it about Zen?
Similar to what a lot of people have been sharing today, it will take me outside of the box that I'm comfortable in and move me into something that I probably wouldn't even be aware of, that my greatest strengths will serve. But if I'm just still doing what I know in my comfort zone, it doesn't, right now, that just doesn't feel accurate. So what I loved about this community, and what it was, 2.5 years that I was pretty involved, it stretched me. And just a very simple thing would be this. I would go through life, and if a stranger that I don't know needed something, I would help them just because of my Zen practice. I remember we talked a lot about if someone is on the side of the road and they need help changing their tires. It's what we do as Zen practitioners is we pull over and help them. And so that's part of what I want to get back into, as opposed to just taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And like getting through life with myself.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Ing, Ken, you've been so patient with us and with me for many years, and this practice, hanging in there when there wasn't a Zen center, and here you are. Ken, why for you?
Patience is the word quality I would use. It's interesting listening to the Sangha members talk about their relationship with Zen, because it underscores for me that I just realize I don't have a line of demarcation. Can before Zen, can after Zen. I don't know where it is. I don't even know if that line exists. I mean, I did ask you about where Zen, the Santa Monica Zen Center was. Why did I run from Mar Vista to 14th looking for it? I don't know why I did that. People don't ask me, or I don't think I've ever been asked about whether or not I practice Zen. It's an interesting thing. You know, I used to be in more contact with people and less so now, but I've never been asked about whether or not I practice Zen. So that's an interesting thing for me to hear. You, Dan, especially talking about, you know, why did you pursue Zen? What does Zen mean to you? To me, it seemed more like a progression from then to now, I guess. I mean, I just really can't explain the attraction to it or what. It just doesn't seem like that line is so clear for me. And that line of Ken no Zen, Ken Zen, it keeps changing. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that it changes a lot. I mean, almost daily, where I catch myself in the non-Ken Zen mode, you know, and I rarely catch myself in the Ken Zen mode, which may just delineate that it's becoming more part of me or I more part of it. I'm really not sure. But that's very interesting because I cannot find that line. It just seems like it's an ongoing progression. And I just happen to find myself at this moment sitting here with my Sangha, listening to other people's experiences with Zen, listening to how that first vow is so important to all of us. And yet at the same time, I can't really point and say, okay, that's when I was Zen and that's when I wasn't.
Nice.
I mean, I wasn't Zen a couple of days ago when I sliced drive into the woods. I was not Zen then, you know? And I thought about it then. I was like, oh, wow, that was interesting. But anyway, I appreciate that koan, you know, coming down off the mountain, being bodhisattvas and not being the cave Buddhas, not necessarily spreading the word, like you say, not necessarily proselytizing, which of course turns everybody off. But to me, it's just finding those separate peaks along the way. You know, a peak might come in the next hour for all I know, or it may have happened yesterday at 12 p.m. I just don't know. Yeah. And one hope I have is to become more aware of these peaks. I tend not to be so conscious of these peaks, except in the negative mode, as I mentioned before.
Well, that is, you mentioned the
So that's my experience with Zen thus far.
yeah, and you mentioned the koan, and there is part of the communication in this story is like the 10th ox herding picture. At a certain point, a walk, at a certain point, a walk or a picnic is just a walk or a picnic, and it's just a beautiful
Exactly.
picnic. It doesn't have to be mysterious peak. It's just like, you know, we're on a picnic, and that is mysterious peak, but it doesn't need to be like, you know, Myohoto, you know. We're nearing the top of the hour. I hadn't intended to like call on everyone, but we almost have. There's Jeff and Christine and John and Lori. I think, why don't I allow you to raise your hand or unmute yourself and say something if you want to at this point. Lori wants to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to listen to you all because I have so many reasons I love Zen. I mean, initially I wanted, I think our son was about 6, 7, something like that. I really wanted something. I grew up in a church. My parents were very involved. So as a result, the whole family was really involved. And, you know, of course I rebelled. You know, I'm still rebellious, but I just felt like it wasn't right that we didn't have something in our lives that kind of knitted us all together other than our natural bonds. I felt like there needed to be something that had more, that was part of the earth and just like everything that was bigger than being a consumer, which is in my life, I kept seeing becoming as consumer more and more what we were charging toward as humankind. And I wanted something bigger than that. So that really functioned highly for me when we started meeting with the Zen Center, and our son was part of it, and he was engaged in a children's program that was very inspiring to all of us. And then when I started getting into koan study, I really, and of course we had a very inspiring teacher who was also very provocative in many ways, which brought up a lot of subjects that you wouldn't necessarily jump into on your own, like how not to create meaning out of things, and if it's not true, I mean, it's not necessarily true that things that happen to you have the meaning that you end up wrapping around it. So that was very engaging, and that helped me really grow a lot internally. And then koan study really helped me understand that I get to be me. That my experience is what this is all about, and that it's my job to pass that on whenever I can.
Nice. Thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, right. I shouldn't just glance by Lori. There's some key things there in what she said is like, if, people, why do you do this? Well, there's community, right? For community to involvement in something bigger than myself. And then specifically in the practice, I really discovered deeply that I get to be me, and there's power in being me, not some version of me that I think is acceptable or.
Well, because naturally, if you're me, you're going to make yourself wrong. And I think a lot of us are like that. I really do think that a lot of us live with that, and we constantly have to break out of that. And it was really wonderful to have an ongoing exercise that really helped me to articulate that in ways that I can't tell you, because you get to find out about koan study by yourself. Yeah. But it's been and ongoingly is very helpful.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Marsh, you got lumped in with art. Sorry, but you can unlump yourself. Jeff?
I'll go first. She wants me to go first. She's pointing at me. She's mouthing. Uh, by the way, hi Mel. So great to see you. Yeah, I got into Zen in college. I had a Jesuit priest who taught Zen, who spent a couple of years in Japan. This guy, Father Ren, who's just a absolutely brilliant, amazing teacher, and kind of taught from a mystical Christian perspective and a Buddhist perspective, and it really like opened up a whole world for me as far as what is real. And then I practiced with the Santa Monica Zen Center, and that's been an amazing path for me. And we did a documentary in Africa on hunger, and I wouldn't have gone there had it not been for my practice, for sure. And doing Landmark. I in answer to the question, like, how do you share about Zen? I met a friend recently on a camping trip, a new friend, and we were talking about, she's an atheist, and anyway, we started talking about meditation. She was like, well, what does that do for you? And I was like, it really just gets me centered and has me be calm and kind of lets all the froth and the nonsense that's on top kind of settle. And so then even if I sit there for whatever it is, 15, 20 minutes, and I'm like anxious the whole time, like, I gotta go do this thing, and thinking about all the things that I have to do, I find that then when I go to do the things, there's less tension. Like, it pulls the air out of the tension, and I'm able to focus and relax more. And I also share that, like as as an artist, it's profoundly helpful for me to just kind of get to what it is that I really want to communicate with, like comedy or music. I mean, I wrote a new song recently, and a lot of it came to me while I was meditating. A lot of the lyrics and the melody came to me as I was meditating. I wrote it down while I was sitting, and that happens a lot. I mean, I do a lot of. We're trying to do a comedy set for next week, and I write a lot while I'm meditating, or I'll jot notes down. It just really like opens me up creatively, because I think as as Lori was pointing to and others have pointed to, like I really get, it gives me the freedom to just be me and get beyond the looking good of it and the, trying to be right and, put on my best face and all that bullshit. So for me, it's a good sword to kind of cut through my own nonsense.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Great. Nicely said. And so Jeff, if he's talking to other creative people, has, as Tennessee said, different people, I will give different answers. But if you're talking to a creative person, it's like, I found this amazing empty space where I can be creative, like I can discover things in my creative self that I didn't even know were there. Or sometimes a song will come out of meditation. My story about being mean works really well when I'm talking to like another father, but I don't use that story everywhere. Any great stuff, Jeff. Thank you. And it's so great to have you.
Yeah. You guys are awesome.
Mark.
Okay, so why do I practice Zen, I guess, was the question, if I'm still on board. Yes. Here. I think I was raised in a family where my father was an atheist and my mother was very religious, and the atheism had an intellectual appeal to me, and the religion had the community and some kind of belief in something bigger than the self. And so neither one of them satisfied me. And when I found Zen, and I think I found it through Kurt Vonnegut when I was in college, that's how I think I first became aware that there was some other way of thinking about things. Make a long story short, Art and I tried to meditate day, just the two of us, and it wasn't going all that well. And I said, we really need to find a community. And so at the back of a magazine, we found the Santa Monica Zen Center, and I think the rest is history. But for me, Zen satisfies my intellectual needs to feel like I found something I can have full confidence in, and my science needs because I'm studying myself, which is like the only thing I really can, you know, get a hold of. And it gives me, well, my Zumi Roshi said, appreciate your life. And I think that it's like, that's the bottom line, you know, just really appreciate what you got, because this is it. So I guess that's kind of why I practice Zen.
You guys get that? That was
Well said.
you see the beauty in that? It's really nice. And each of us have our own expression, you know, but the way Marsha did that, you know, raised by an atheist and a religious person, both of those had appeals, but not everything. Zen satisfies the intellectual side of me and the science side of me and the faith and community side. But ultimately, it comes down to appreciating your life. Really nice, really nice. I'm in, Marsh. What Zen center do you practice at? Anyway, anybody else? I know we're running late, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak that wants to.
I just wanted to add one thing. It's I relate to Ken, where I actually think nobody ever has asked me about Zen specifically. Like, why do you practice? I feel like people are kind of afraid of it a little bit. But somebody who did ask me, and I don't think they're on anymore, is John Hopper. Before, I think he's gone. But he actually did ask me before getting involved in this community. He didn't even want to meet with you, Dan. I was like, you should ask him questions. I was like, he can answer all your questions. He was like, no, I want to talk to you. He was like, I need to. And my answer to him was just Sangha. That was it. I was just like, I meditate on my own, but like this community is incredible. And that was my answer. So.
That seems to have worked. and hopefully it's working. Hopefully it's working for him. He's been very open and loving and sharing with all of us. So, you know, I'm sure he had to leave for a good reason, but John's been a great addition. Well, Tal, I guess I am just going to at least say hi, Tal, and see if you've got anything, because otherwise it would look like we're deliberately leaving you out. I can't see her. She's shaking her head, or where is she? She's going, no, I don't have anything. You good? Okay. Anyway.
Good and grateful for you all.
Well, that's good. There you go.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, everybody. I just, you know, like I said, I had heard a couple different questions and conversations come up during the week. I think this koan about going on a picnic and is it Mysterious Mountain or is it a walk is germane. I love the practice. I love everything about it. We've learned lots of lingo. There's koans and all this stuff we talk about it. But we need to be able to walk in the world and appreciate our life and make life better for those around us, you know. And if the practice is not doing that, then why do it, you know? So, and then part of that, at different points in time, people go, well, why are you doing this every Sunday? What is this about? Something's changed, like for Andrea. It's really helpful at that time just to go through this exercise we just did, and you've all heard each other have different expressions. There's nothing wrong, by the way, of stealing someone else's language if you are like, oh yeah, that's it. You know, just use it. It'll come out in your own voice. And all language is stolen anyway, Akasha says. Yeah, everyone here is beautiful in their own way, and you're going to express it in your own way. And as Akasha said, I get to be me, be you. It's a beautiful thing. So we'll end there. Thank you for hanging in for the extra few minutes.